Happy Friday, Liana. I'm happy to join you today.
Happy Friday. So, thank you so much. We always have such really interesting discussions. So, I wanted to have one of our discussions be live. And this is something that we have never talked about before together, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
That's something a lot of marketers, a lot of business people don't talk much about because they're so focused on the next tactic and how do I get to the next level. But that's actually what we were going to talk about,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I'd love it if you could, because I thought it was really interesting that you came to this topic from your history and sort of your personal experience. Can you share a little bit about, number one, maybe like flesh out what you thought would be really interesting for people as well, and then also how you came about it, because I think you have like a really interesting backstory to this as well that we can all relate to.
Yeah. First of all, I mean, you're seeing me on camera right now. This actually is my childhood bedroom. In fact, right now where my hand is, this is where my crib was when I was a baby.
Wow.
40 years ago. So I'm living with my parents, and but it's interesting to have that context, like physically to have that context, because it reminds me, like I we didn't grow up with a lot, and the only reason my parents, were able to afford a house and all now in Southern California is because they bought the house back in the early 1970s. But as a child, yeah, I remember even as a baby in the crib, I used to overhear their conversations in the kitchen, which is over there, and I would hear how much pain they were about finances and my dad losing his jobs and the racism that they faced and all of that. It just really made me think about like how hard life can be. And as I've come up, I just tried to remember. And it hasn't been hard to remember like where I've come from, especially still living here. But really reflecting on like why am I doing what I'm doing? And I got caught up in, as maybe you can relate to, when you come from an Asian background, oftentimes it's about achievement. What grades you get in school, and then when you actually get out into the working world, like what title you have, what company you work for, like the names matter, the titles matter, the money matters, like all of that stuff is part of how you see yourself. And I just internalized all that stuff way too much. My whole identity was based on that, and I had really severe social anxiety. I wasn't not a very functional person. I was just in enormous pain, and I was just trying to hold on to some sense of significance from anything I could achieve. And so as I worked my way out of that, it's taken, took years to do that, but I started to see like that basic problem is something that a lot of people have when they go into business. They start comparing. There's a guy named Brian Ahern who is a Robert Cialdini certified trainer, and there's only less than 10 of those certified trainers in the world. It's not an easy certification to get, to be certified by Robert Cialdini himself. But he was like, one of his sayings is, nothing is high or low, but comparing makes it so. As soon as you start comparing anything, yourself to someone else, then you start to feel lower, and you start to feel the imposter syndrome and other things. And then you start to do things that you wouldn't actually want to do on your own. Like, oh, I have to get to a seven-figure business. Like, that may not have ever crossed your mind before. You heard all these other people talking about, like, oh, that's the thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, or you start getting messages from, "Hey, I'm 25 and I just made my first million." And you're thinking, "Wow, I've wasted so much of my life." And you didn't think about that until now, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's all these apparently 20-year-old millionaires and 25-year-old millionaires. And
And the
maybe it's
gazillionaires
just,
are all on Clubhouse. So
yeah, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how much of it is true and how much of it isn't. But the thing is, like, even if that's true, like they made $1 million, they made 2 million, whatever it is, I don't think, like, they don't have the balance in their life. They're probably going to lose the money. They're probably going to blow the money. They don't appreciate what that money really means to them, and they're probably desperately trying to hold on to it too, saying, "Well, I don't feel significant," or they may not be conscious of it, but they probably would be massively depressed if they lost the money because they are in pain about needing to project themselves as a certain kind of person, a successful person. Otherwise, they don't feel like enough.
yeah.
And it's just really dangerous.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned too, coming from an Asian background. I'm sure other people from other backgrounds relate to this too, because I think it's about living with your parents' expectations, or right, what you project are your family's expectations on you. And then the way I've observed, I think there are two groups of people who move into this entrepreneur world. There's somebody like myself who's basically come from the corporate having a job employee mentality, which took me a long time to get rid of. And then I think the other people who just it's like maybe didn't even finish high school but got to where they are because it was just hustle and street smarts. And I do remember it being very humbling. When I left, I was restructured. And you're right, my whole identity was in I was a lawyer. Like that was because that was that I was not a doctor, right? So being a lawyer was acceptable, right?
My
And I
brother's a
was an
lawyer.
accountant. There you go, right? And yeah, then all of a sudden that's taken away from you, and then you move into the online world and nobody cares, and it's you see people around you that, yeah, just because of street smarts, they get ahead so far, and I'm thinking, wow, like I think I'm smart enough, and but your whole story just holds you back. So I can 100% relate to what you went through.
Yeah, I came from an employee background as well, although I had always had a dream since I was little to start a business and be successful. But again, it was like very ego based. It was like, I'm going to be successful. I'm going to show you. I'm going to be this person, and then life always has a way of humbling people, and that's what I needed. I failed at almost every startup I ever did in the last 20 years. Honestly,
Yeah.
I did so many projects, and every single project I learned something really great, and I made some progress, and I did something that I couldn't do in a previous project because I grew as a person. But I would fail at it and be like, and I would always just feel terrible about myself. And at some point, I said, "This has got to be. This has to become a joyful journey because this is what's in my heart to do with my life, and I just want to make it a joyful journey. And if I fail at a business, okay, but if I enjoyed the process, then so what? Like it's a game that I can play, and there's always the next project. And yeah, that person who's never started a business made $1 million on a Shopify store or whatever it is, but so be it. And that can be hard. Like some days it still is hard to be like, yeah, that person didn't have any experience, and for whatever reason they made it, and I didn't.
Hmm. Yeah. And well, and also when you say I made it, what is that?
What does that mean,
How do
right?
you define that? Yes. I mean, maybe you could share a little bit about what you're doing now, because I just think you're always working on such interesting things. And I know that you're very humble, and you're so open to sharing and helping. And it really does, that integrity comes through everything that you do. But
Thank
I'm
you.
also super impressed with just the cool stuff you work on as well.
Yeah, I'm lucky. I get to be a marketing director at a company called Pre-Hired, and I've been passionate about education for a long time. That's one of the reasons we connected over at AdSkills, right? And we're just passionate about education in general, and so we help people change careers into, in our case, tech sales. But the cool thing is we do it in 12 weeks. So instead of going to college for 4 years or 3 years or whatever it is, and taking a bunch of classes you don't like, and taking out huge amounts of student debt, and just having to go through the whole application process and getting to start school 9 months from now because you have to go through the application process and you miss the app deadline, and like all of that stuff goes away, and you can apply and interview with us within a couple of days, be accepted, start the program, and then within a few days total from the time you even heard about us, and then be able to actually land a new job in 12 weeks. And that's actually the median time, literally 12 weeks to land a new job. And you know, it's it's great to see the transformation. It makes me really happy to see the transformation that people have, just because they're often coming from backgrounds where they weren't making much money, or they were working tons of hours, like retail and food service and rideshare driving and other sales jobs where they're burnout sales jobs and no base pay and all of that stuff. So that's what I get to do, but I also get to manage, a lot of advertising spend, and I go deep into our analytics, and so I'm always working on just ways of optimizing things. And one of the things that I'm passionate about is like risk management and media buying, because there's so many people teaching me, like, here's how to run ads on Facebook or YouTube or whatever, but they don't talk about, like, especially when you're dealing with more and more ad spend, how do you actually manage the risk without going insane and being able to sleep at night? So I'm just coming up with more and more ways, and I was kind of in my spreadsheets a lot, but at the same time knowing that data by itself is dangerous. It can be like data in the dark, as I say, is dangerous because it tells you what's happening, but it doesn't tell you why it's happening. So I'm always reaching out to people on LinkedIn who are joining our program and asking them what were they looking for, what struggles did they have, what is it that actually got them to join, and listening to the admissions interviews because they're recorded. All of that gives you the context, and that context is so important. So combining the quantitative stuff that we'd like, all the the hard data that you can look at, with all the qualitative, like the conversations. Like sometimes if people ask me, like, hey, what's the best tool to use for marketing? Like what are the best tools, the best analytics tools? And I say, well, the best tool is always a conversation because it's going to give you the most insight, the most context, right? And then if you can get the data in Google Analytics or Wicked reports, or your CRM data, which I like the best, whatever it is you can get, all of that data is really poured into like a bowl. That is the context that you get from like the conversations that you have with people.
There is so much I want unpacked out of what you just said there. So, first of all, I just want to touch on the types of people coming into the program. Do you find that they have the same type of mentality that you're trying to help them get past? I mean, you're getting them to a job within 12 weeks. Do you also find they're coming with those stories of expectation as well? I think you said it as, subconsciously trying to prove your worthiness instead of trying to find their true purpose. It sounds like, are you trying to help these people find their true purpose and through a more steadier job than what they're used to?
It's a great question. Yeah, we do. Um, One of the things that people often say, and this is not everybody because people come from different backgrounds, but some people say, hey, I was really interested in the tech industry. I'm very interested in technology. I use it in my personal life. I'm the person that people come to when they want help setting up their DVR or whatever, like recording shows or whatever it is, with their phone. But I had no background to get into this industry. I always thought you have to go and get a professional or very technical kind of degree. Like I happen to have a computer science degree, but you don't need that to get into the industry anymore. Like even if you're going to be a hardcore coder or something like network engineer or whatever, you don't need that degree anymore, which is amazing. But they thought, I got to have that degree, or I like some of them know about the coding boot camps and other like really technical boot camps, and they say, like even those, they seem just hard, and like I thought that's the only way to get into the industry. And so when I found you guys, I was like, I didn't know sales was an opportunity within this industry. So that's really nice to hear, because then like just in hearing that, like they actually had a genuine interest in the industry, but they just didn't know where they fit in, and they felt like they didn't fit in. And when they found this path, they're like, oh wow, I actually have a place, and it's really valuable, like because these technologies are actually very complicated, and so giving people clarity about what their problems are, and then a potential solution, which is what you do as a tech salesperson. Like they found, like, oh my god, I get to do that. I get to be helping people, and I get to be seen as a go-to expert, and all of that just means a lot to them, because a lot of them didn't have that kind of um, feeling of what they were doing now, like they were on purpose, and they also just want to be. They do want to be seen as someone who's deserving of respect professionally. So there is some of that too.
Wow. That's one thing I learned from Tony Robbins is you do feel more fulfilled when everything is more aligned in terms of what you do and the story in your head. And I just listening to you talk about it really, I love that it sounds like you really are helping people find their true purpose and matching it up, because like you said, they didn't even realize that they could find their true purpose in the tech world. And I find that surprising when you said to me, oh, you don't need coding, you don't need all these things. Is there gonna be a huge jump of people now going onto your site, or they didn't realize you needed all that? I just thought you have to be super techy and you hang out on Discord all the time and talk code.
Yeah, the tech salespeople don't need to know any of that stuff. Honestly, like they have, when conversations get very technical, they have what are called sales engineers that know the answers to the really technical questions. But in terms of clarifying a client's problems, and then if a given software platform or technical platform will actually solve those problems, that's what the tech salesperson knows how to do, just because that's a conversation. They know what their software does. They know the types of features that they have and what those features do. They don't need to know the bits and bytes of like exactly how it happens. And they know, like, oh, you have that problem. Yeah, we solve that kind of problem, and so they're able to over time learn the product. They learn the product. from the training that the employers give them, and they learn how to sell and the technical kind of sales process, what we call the tool skills and workflows that people need to know to even have a chance of getting the job, because there's 3 or 4 interview rounds, and most people never get the interview, or they don't pass those interview rounds unless they can demonstrate that knowledge. So there's just
Mm,
so many people, applying for those jobs. But once they have that, and once they know how to prospect for a job like a professional salesperson would prospect, that's the really cool part. We show them how to do that. So like the sales hiring managers are like, oh wow, you're actually prospecting me the way that a professional salesperson that I would want to hire. I expect them to prospect for my company. So yeah, let me talk to you. And
that's
so they
amazing.
they get conversations that that many other people, ironically, they're just applying for jobs the normal way. So
That's really neat.
they don't get those conversations.
I love that. And our for those of you who don't know, most of the time, my conversations with Sunny end up us geeking out on techie stuff and stats, and that's how I knew you from Justin Brooke and Ad Skills. Is Sunny is the stats person. If you want to talk, anybody can talk about. If you want to talk about tracking and complex things, talk to Sunny. And you're always so busy because I know you're in a high demand. But I loved what you said, which kind of hooks into what you just talked about, is you said the best tool, like the best measuring tool or the best marketing measuring tool is conversations. It's not
I've
fancy software necessarily.
I've always found that to be true. Yeah, because it provides so much rich information, especially when you get on a video call like this and you record it. Because usually when I do a call like this, it gives me that in real time. But then also when I watch it again, I see things I didn't even see, and I hear things I didn't even hear. I'm like, wow, how did I miss? How did I miss all that? But there's only so much you can process at a given time, anyways, right? You see the body language, like when you ask something and the person like just very slightly twinges, or they say, wow, there's just genuine pain about that thing. I gotta maybe have a follow-up conversation about that. Or do other people have that problem? Because I thought that was like a minor problem, but it seems like just from the body language, not what the person said, like that's actually the most painful thing for them. So there's so much information there. And then like when you get those insights, you can say, well, maybe we should test a headline related to that, because we've been testing all these other things. And there's always something more you can test, but because such a vast universe of stuff you can test, you need anything you can get to be able to narrow it down. So if you can get these conversations happening where it gives you insights like, these are actually the 3 or 4 or 5 things we want to test as our highest priority, like these, let's test these things next, then that's powerful, because then it may not take you 6 months to get to that. It could take you 6 days instead, because you got that insight that's actually where the pain is. So I was talking with Justin Brooke on the call, the Guardian call, about data being like a treasure hunt. That's how I see it. Like digging into data is like a treasure hunt, and he was saying he thinks of it as like cheat codes. Like either way, whatever metaphor you want to use, like the data is amazing, but it's not just the quantitative data, it's just numbers. It's the qualitative data too, about what people tell you. And then one thing I was sharing on a call yesterday with someone, another marketer, was how you define things is so powerful, because that frames, like, we're, as marketers, we're always trying to frame, or as business people, we're always trying to frame what we offer as valuable, right? So that people want it. So we have credibility frames, we have all these different things we do to position ourselves as like the person to come to, right? The business to come to. But how you define your work itself frames for you how you approach it. So I ask other marketers, how do you define marketing? Because that will completely determine how you approach it in the first place.
Wow. So how do you, as a marketing director, build this into a process? I mean, clearly you have a lot of other things to do in each day than talk to people all day long. How I think some of us think about this too, and you're part of a bigger company. Like, could you share a little bit about your process and how you could help maybe a smaller team can do this? How scalable is this?
Yeah, I think of us as a fairly small team, especially our marketing team. Like I'm actually the only full-time person right now, and then we have a part-time. We have 2 part-time people, and so they split their time between departments. And then one of them over the next couple of months is going to shift to full-time. So we're fairly small, and we're
Mhm.
growing. But how you go about it is really prioritize. I would say there's a big difference between lead sources. This is one of the biggest insights I found. So if you're running traffic from, you can pick any lead sources, YouTube or Facebook or whatever, you're going to see differences between the lead sources. So if you think, hey, I want to get more traffic from YouTube, then the people who came from YouTube, talk to them, prioritize talking to them. So if you got we got 3 customers from YouTube last month, if that's the case, then prioritize conversations with them, because you can understand their mindset, what they saw on YouTube, like what was their journey and finding you, what were they looking for, because it's probably going to be different than the person on Facebook, and it's probably going to be different than the person who came from a referral. So that's one way you can really narrow down how many people you're going to talk to. And when I say talk to, you don't necessarily have to get on a video call, even though that's nice. You can just start as LinkedIn conversations. That's often what I do. I just reach out to people. I chat back and forth on LinkedIn. What I do is I have a spreadsheet. Shocking, I know, that I would have a spreadsheet, but I have a spreadsheet of feedback that people are giving us. So I just ask them those kinds of questions about, hey, what were you looking for? What made us different than other things you were looking for? What else did you consider? And I store that feedback from each person I ask, because it's often insightful. And on Facebook, because Facebook, even when you're not explicitly doing retargeting, they're somewhat retargeting people all the time. As you know, you're a Facebook expert, because they know, like, someone's interested in this topic, then they start showing your ads. Like, well, what were you searching for online in general that before you saw our ad? Because that's also context for you, and you can store all those answers and then review that feedback, and it's useful. You start to show patterns.
That's so smart. So, yeah, if you have your targeting set up right, and you have, or at least you have a better idea of where the customers are coming from. I love that. I hadn't thought about it in that way, where, like you said, but that makes sense, right? If I want more YouTube customers, go talk to the people who came from YouTube. You're right, because it's a very different behavior coming from YouTube versus TikTok versus Facebook, Pinterest. They're all Instagram. It's all, you're right. It's a different. I think of it like you say, context. I mean, I think of it more in terms of, I guess, like personality, but it's the same thing. You're right. It's a different context. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and these are things that pretty much, you know how they say breakdowns lead to breakthroughs. Pretty much every one of these things came from me stressing out, like, what am I doing? Like, I can't manage this. I can't. There's just not enough hours in the day, and I'm just passing out at the end of the day, going, yeah, like the day went from sunrise to sunset, and like I only got this much done, and like, how am I ever gonna do X, Y, and Z? And like just asking myself these really deep questions, like, how am I ever gonna achieve these things? Like, I have to find a way to actually prioritize something that's more important. Like, how do I do this better? And so I actually want to give you a framework too. I call this the CVS framework, and I just named it that partially because obviously it's an acronym, but also CVS is, like, I don't know if in Canada, like where you are, but the CVS pharmacy is a big pharmacy that they have a number of locations throughout the U.S. And it's my framework for pipeline health, or if you're a marketer, you call it funnel health, which is a funny thing in itself. Marketers say a funnel, salespeople call it a pipeline, but it's just one thing. We're all just selling, right? And it's really all just one thing, not two separate things. But CVS stands for conversion percentage, volume, and speed. So when you're looking at what is the health of your funnel or your pipeline from any given lead source, because you want to do it per lead source, what is the conversion percentage per stage? And then what is the volume? Because sometimes you can have a really high conversion percentage, but the volume is really small. Let's say you have a really niche offer, like you get 5 people from your list to buy this really high ticket offer. The conversion percentage is really high, but the volume is really small. Oftentimes conversion percentage does go with volume, and like you get a good volume as well, but not always, like in the niche offer case. So you're looking at conversion percentage, volume, and then speed. Like, how fast did they come through per lead source? Did they come through your process? Because if you discover anything that's off with any of those for a given lead source that you're trying to optimize versus other lead sources that you've been working on for longer, like in your case, you've been working on Facebook longer, and like, hey, we got this really dialed in, it's really well, it's working out really well, good conversion percentage, good volume, good speed, we're happy. And then you go to YouTube and like, oh my God, like you compare those conversion percentage, volume, and speed for YouTube versus Facebook, you're like, oh, we have work to do. And not that it's going to be exactly the same, but it just really gives you a benchmark, and it lets you break down like how do we optimize these three things, and you can often do them somewhat separately. So it gives you a way to not go crazy and to actually accurately see things on a day-to-day basis.
So how do you then categorize people who then buy from the list? Because there are, I mean, I get the speed factors because we're always trying to look for people who will do the direct buys, but some funnels take have a longer runway, right? So maybe you have somebody who saw who maybe opted in twice, right, from Facebook and YouTube, and then 2 months later, bought from the list, and maybe for that particular sales pipeline, like that's normal, or that's even fast, because I know there
Yeah.
are some companies where this, it's a year long, right, sales pipeline. So how would you categorize that within the channel framework?
Yeah, it's a good question. You really have to pick an attribution model, and it's just really just a fancy way of saying like just pick a way of looking at the data. So first opt-in is often a way I do it. So where did they first opt in from? If they first opted in at Facebook, then they're a Facebook lead. If they first opted in from YouTube, then they're a YouTube lead. Like, yeah, were they influenced by other things over time? Yeah, sometimes, right? Especially when you're doing multi-channel stuff, or you're doing retargeting on a different platform, and they also opted in from there, etc. That's good to look at, but that's like more like breakdown of like exactly how did certain people convert. That is useful because you want to optimize your spend in all these different channels, and all that's important. But for CVS, oftentimes you can just look at it like, hey, it's first opt-in,
Mhm.
or it could be first click. I mean, if you wanted to do it that way, although it's often harder to track. But first opt-in is often a way that's easy for any business owner to track, because that if you have a CRM, whether you're using HubSpot or ActiveCampaign or whatever, as soon as they opt in, just tag them as a lead source. Lead source equals this, and then at that point, your job is to notice if it changes. Like have some automation. Like if this changes, then revert it back because you want to capture like where they originally came from.
Mhm. And then it sounds like you're doing the survey after they buy, right? So do you just build that into the the post purchase funnel after that, or?
Yeah, I'm often doing it as I'm just noticing who buys, and I'm reaching out to some people. That's just
Mhm.
as simple as that. Me messaging them on LinkedIn, and just asking them, like just having a chat. Oftentimes, like I don't just directly launch into questions. I'll just kind of have a chat first. Like, hey, congrats, and what's your favorite part so far, and things like that. There's because they're excited, right? When somebody buys, and it's nice to reinforce that, and they deserve to be congratulated because they came through a lot of fear, especially with us. I mean, we sound too good to be true, and that's the biggest objection anybody has. Almost always, like they almost always tell me that. If I ask them about hesitations, they're like, "Yeah, I really thought this was a scam. Like I've never heard of anything crazy like this. 12 weeks, come on now." 12 weeks, an hour and a half a day. It's not even full time. It's like an hour and a half a day, so you can maintain a full time job while you're doing our program. They're like, yeah, that sounded way too good to be true. But you have 1,200 people you've helped, and you have all these things. So I'm like, oh, this must be true, but it still sounds too good to be true. Like so they go through the entire process extremely skeptical, regardless of the awards and everything else we show them, and then our testimonials and all that stuff, right? And that's like we know that that's our biggest friction point.
Mhm. And you make it sound so simple, and it kind of is, right? Just be human. Don't try to be a marketer, right? Just be a nice person to say how's it going, and build a relationship that way.
Yeah,
And
and to tag on to that, it's not just when people buy, like any stuck point, like if you're trying to optimize for people get to stage number three of your process and then they just drop off, then reach out to those people. Because every stage that people get to, every step that someone takes really is a sale on itself. It's not that they had to give you money. It's kind of like um, it's just the mindset that you're always serving them, and that's what sales is about. So if they opt in, they've taken a step, right? That's a sale in a way. If they apply, that's another sale in a way. They didn't give you money or anything. In our case, actually, they never give us money until when they actually get a job and start earning. And we have what's called an income share agreement. So we don't get any money from them regardless when they go through our program. They go through the entire program without giving us anything. But most businesses will take that they'll take the money at the transaction stage, right? As soon as they buy, right? But it's not just that. It's any stage. They put something in the shopping cart, that's a sale because they took another step. So if they get there and then they abandon cart, or you're having a big problem with abandoned carts, then reach out to those people and just have a conversation. And to the extent that they're willing to have a conversation, because some people will just ghost you. A lot of people will, but even this is another big thing is like even 5 conversations can make a big difference. Like, oh my God, these people are telling us like this is broken and I didn't even know. And then you go and test it and oh my God, that is broken. I didn't even notice that.
Mhm.
So it can make a big difference to talk to 3, 4, 5 people.
That's reassuring, to know that you don't have to hit for 100 or 1,000 or something like that to make it, quote, unquote, "statistically significant." Uh,
That's a big concept. Yeah, the whole statistical significance thing is it's crazy. Like I've been doing some split testing on Google Optimize, and it tells you one of the things it tells you is that you've got to wait 2 weeks to get your test results, which kind of makes sense because they're trying to account for just variability in the given day that you're in. So, but I say like at least a week because if you go through an entire Sunday to Sunday cycle, then you probably have accounted for a good chunk. But they say 2 weeks, but then even then, like you get thousands of page views and they're still not ending the experiment. They're like they still don't feel like they have statistical significance. So it's like it's pretty extreme.
Sure.
And
But if
I
you,
think
like you
as a
said,
marketer, it's tough.
if you get 5 people who say, "I clicked and I could not buy," that's
Yeah,
probably enough for you to go check it, and as you
yeah.
said, it probably is broken. So
Or if you're getting like 100 people a day to your site to your landing page, and you're running that for 7 days. I mean, that's a pretty good test, honestly. Like even Google Optimize won't tell you that it's a good test because they have a really high bar for deciding that. But
yeah.
like you got to be agile. They only have a certain amount of ad spend, and so honestly, I think you can get pretty good data from a lot less data
Yeah,
and
and
a
I know
lot
that
less spend.
there are tools too that you can, like Hotjar, for example, they can just put up a little survey once in a while, and I know there's other tools that you can have a chat pop up, and so it's also may not, especially if somebody's on their own, like a solopreneur, it may not be that you have to, reach out personally. There's I think there's ways along the funnel, right, that you can have these little, like you said, these little chats even just as a friendly little check-in.
Yeah, you can. Some of those just pop up with one question, and because it's just one question, somebody might say, I can answer that one question.
Mhm. Yeah. So I feel like you've sort of snuck in here this masterclass in optimization. But what I love about it is because I love these types of tips because I did a TikTok a couple days ago about being lazy. Gary V was saying lazy is a good thing. And I said, absolutely, because pretty much whenever I try and come up with something, it's because I don't want to do it. Right. And, I think what you talked about here is I love that you're getting results faster, but you're getting the more meaningful results faster. That's why I love it how it's just channel specific, because you're right. A lot of times we are very focused on one channel because it's hard to master one channel at a time. And that just makes more sense instead of just talking to a bunch of random people.
Yeah, overwhelm, I feel like, is one of the biggest problems in marketing, and it really goes back to what we're talking about at the very beginning about needing, like, comparing ourselves versus other people. Like, oh my God, I don't know much about chatbots. I'm an idiot. Like, I'm not a good marketer. Like we have those conversations in our head, all the imposter syndrome kicks up again because we're not on the very, very latest thing. And so we end up trying to do everything or trying to do so many things, and you just
Mhm.
can't do everything. And but but if we have that emotional trauma in the first place driving the behavior of I have to get to 7 figures or I have to use chatbots because otherwise my marketer friends will think I'm an idiot, then even if it doesn't apply to your specific situation, like if it does, then it might be a good strategy for you to venture into that, right? And to not do as much of something else so that you can actually put the right time investment into it. But we all have to be mindful of that because there's so many good ideas, or at least it seems like there's so many good ideas. Like, how do you actually choose between all these universe of good ideas? Just like how do you choose between the universe of test ideas? How do you actually narrow it down to something that makes sense for you and to actually feel good about yourself in the process to say no to so many things and to still feel okay about yourself? That's something that's a conversation that really needs to be had because many marketers are driving themselves insane. I know I have.
Mhm. Yeah, and there is no one way. if there was one way we would know it, we would share it, and everybody would be doing well, right? There's no one way that is universal and that somebody is just hiding somewhere from us. They all, right? At some level, they all work. I hear what you're saying. There's definitely a lot of overwhelm there.
The holy grail of marketing, yeah.
That's right, right? It's so how can I or anybody, listening in on here, how can we be helpful to you?
Conversations. I enjoy the conversations because so many dots get connected in these conversations. Ideas that you already have, you've already got so much raw material in your head. You and your listeners and just people in general have all these different ideas that we've gathered from different places, and then having conversations helps us connect those dots. Be like, oh my god, this idea goes great with this. I never thought of that. I'm going to go work on that. Like, that's those sparks of connection between things, between ideas that become actionable, that things you can go and implement. That's not only just you can implement it, but just that it's exciting and that it feels like the next step on your path. And if you're on this path because you're passionate about this path in the first place, then it's an amazing thing for that to happen, because you're helping yourself, you're helping others, and it's just magical. I don't know how else to describe it. It's a magical thing. So the conversations are great. So feel free to reach out for conversations.
And what's the best place to find you?
You could find me on LinkedIn. I know you. Thank you very much. You put my LinkedIn URL, LinkedIn link on your screen. And also, I'm an Ad Skills Pro League if anybody's in there. But yeah, feel free to reach out.
It's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Sunny. Like I said, I always learn so much from you, but I think more importantly, and I just realized this, you do that. You spark ideas and you spark creativity from uh, thoughts that I already had. And I think that's part of your superpower. And I just love having conversations with you. So I hope we can have another
Thank
conversation
you.
soon.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay, great.